Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our very last webinar of August. My name is Sonia Siddiqui, and I'm with Online Services at Access Employment. And joining me today is Jamal and Joanne from RBC. Hi,
Hello.
girls.
Hi.
And they're going to be talking about interview tips and best practices at RBC.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for that presentation. Just to introduce myself, my name is Jamal Alrez. Just like you, I immigrated to Canada in 1993 from Lebanon, and I joined RBC in 2017. In terms of my background, I have a Bachelor's of Commerce, and I specialize in human resource management. And I've been working at RBC as a senior recruitment consultant for the Advice Center. I do have past experience as well. I worked in the fields of investments, accounting, real estate, and telecommunications. Um, and in terms, on a more personal note, I do love to hike and to go camping. And for those that moved to Canada already, you'll notice that the winter's a little long. So I would suggest that you pick up on some of the winter sports that we have here so that you can enjoy the winter a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Jamal. So, hi, everybody. My name is Joanne Lopez. I am Canadian. I was born in Kamloops, BC. In terms of my background, I have a bachelor's specialization in human relations and a graduate diploma in youth work. I joined RBC in November 2015. My current role is recruitment consultant for the Advice Center. I did have a previous role. I was a senior cards advisor here from the business. Initially, I joined RBC. I was an employee referral. So, I mean, I'm happy to be part of this amazing company. And I'm really excited for you guys to be able to share this webinar experience with you. For those of you, especially that are interested in joining the Canadian labor market, we have an exciting presentation. So welcome, everybody. So for the topics of today, we will talk about the importance of dressing for success and really what it means to be your best self. We're going to talk about the importance of doing research, so being prepared in advance, the do's and don'ts for phone interview and in-person interview. We're going to talk about the importance of power statements, really what is that added value and what it means to build your brand. And at the end, we're going to have a questions Q&A session. So, of course, we will be open to any questions you guys might have.
So moving on to the next slide here, we want to put a lot of emphasis on doing your research. Doing your research on the position and department can really, really help you prepare for an interview over the phone or in person. We really want you to tap into your network. For those who have LinkedIn, it might be a good idea to do a general search of the people that maybe work for for the company you hope to work for, and to go about asking them as many questions as you can so that you can familiarize yourself with the company before your interview. Sometimes by tapping into your network, you find out things that you could not find on their online website, for example. You need to make a list of the skills, the knowledge, and professional and personal qualities that are required by the employer and are critical for the success in the job. How can you do that? Oftentimes, reading the job posting can help you identify the qualities that the employer is looking for. And by doing that, you can tie it into your personal experience and find examples for each of the requirements that they're looking for. Just tying into that again, you need to review the job requirements prior to the interview so that you're prepared to share your list of capabilities, transferable skills, and accomplishments during the interview. So preparation is really key here to personal research and by viewing the job posting and the website of your employer.
All right, so when you're creating that list for yourself, we want to focus on your strengths. So use positive verbiage, use great words that describe you. So you can use words as self-starter, creative, motivated, decisive, resourceful. So keep those positive words in mind.
Perfect. So that was actually on the next slide. Sorry about that, guys. But just to kind of recap here, those positive words can really help you with your first impression. They want to see you as someone that is positive, that is forward thinking, that uses positive terminology. And so this is a good list for you to have here. Sonia, can you please go to the next slide? Perfect. One more slide. Thank you very much. Perfect. So here are some general interview tips for you to prepare for an interview, whether on the phone or in person. You want to dress smartly, look professional, because the first impression counts. What do we mean by that? Oftentimes, a recruiter or hiring manager will make a decision on your candidacy in the first few minutes that they've met with you. So have a good first impression because you want the direction of the interview to be positive. You need to also speak clearly and with confidence, um, because you only have, like, let's say, a limited amount of time to spend with the hiring manager or the recruiter. When you speak to them, they need to understand your examples, they need to understand your answers so that they don't ask you to repeat yourself, for example. You also need to know your resume like the back of your hand. As recruiters, we get these candidates sometimes, they're just reading off their resume, so it becomes very, very difficult to create a report with them, to really get to know them because they're looking at that piece of paper throughout the interview. They might be very qualified for the role, but we weren't able to get that out of them. Think before you speak. So what do we mean by that? We know that oftentimes when we're in an interview, because we're nervous, we tend to respond very quickly. But remember that you can take a few moments to think about the answer that you want to give, so that when you do answer, they get the most quality from your answer.
And in terms of the don'ts, don't be late. That's obviously a given, but sometimes it still happens, unfortunately. The bus, you have to plan to, if you're taking public transportation, plan, to leave ahead of time so that you're not stuck in traffic. And if it happens that, which it does happen, unfortunately, that, sometimes we're late due to unforeseen circumstances, take the time to call the recruiter, let them know, keep them in the loop, call them, 10, 20 minutes before ahead of time. Don't use profanity, slang words, or mumble. So, like Jamal was saying, the importance of speaking clearly and definitely. You want to have a good posture, so don't slouch in your seat, and don't do anything that makes you look uninterested. So maintain that eye contact. And don't read from your notes or your resume. So like Jamal was saying, you should know your resume inside out. You are the master of your story. So if we're asking you, what was the date that you worked at a certain employment, you should be able to provide that information.
We'll cover it a bit later on, but having that elevator pitch. So what we mean by that is you need to learn to tell your story and tell it well. Again, you only have maybe 30 minutes to an hour for them to get to know you. So organize your thoughts. Think about the things that you want to mention that are important for your candidacy so that when you present them, you have the right positioning for it. Something that's very obvious here, don't criticize former employers or colleagues. Mm-hmm. Why? I mean, if you can talk badly about your previous employer, your new employer might fear that you would talk badly about them. You should be able to look at your past experience in a way where there's always an added value from your experience there. Whether it was positive or negative, I am sure that there was always a lesson that you learned. There are skills that you developed on, and you need to focus on that when you speak to your future employer. It's also important to ask questions during the interview because it shows that you came prepared, that you are motivated, that you are really interested in the role, that you're not just coming into the interview and hoping to get out as quickly as possible. You want to find out more about your future employer. And so don't forget to not argue with the interviewer. And remember to keep things positive. So it might seem obvious for most of us, but sometimes, depending on the role that you're applying for, you might not always be in agreement with what the interviewer is saying. I think for the purpose of the interview, you want to just be able to show your qualities and why you're the right person for the job. If in the future you do get the position and there's something that you feel the need to correct, then that would be the right time to do it, but not at the interview stage.
And as a rule of thumb, always keep it professional, keep it diplomatic.
Absolutely. Perfect. So moving on to the next slide here.
So more do's and don'ts for telephone interviews. Of course, when we have a phone interview, we want to remember to speak slowly so that way you can really articulate and enunciate your words clearly and give concise responses. It may be helpful to stand during the interview. So if this is a phone interview and you're at home, feel free to stand. It'll give you more a sense of control over the conversation for the interview. Of course, we want to make sure you answer your phone professionally. If you are in process with different employers and you're expecting a phone call, get into the habit of responding professionally. Use a landline if possible. But I know nowadays it's a little bit tricky if we all have our cell phones. But regardless, the importance of really answering professionally is important. Clear the room. So make sure that you really allow yourself that space wherever it is you are. If you're at home, make sure there's no distractions. So make sure there's no kids nearby or any pets. Turn off the radio, the TV, close the door, and ensure that you do have reception on the cell phone or whatever phone you're using. It does happen, it's kind of annoying if the line should lose service or if the line cuts. So we wanna be mindful of that. Have a glass of water at hand. The typical telephone interview is usually 20 to 30 minutes. Sometimes, it could go up to 40 minutes. So speaking a lot during that time, it's important to have a glass of water nearby. And have your talking points in front of you, including a list of accomplishments. So there's no harm in being prepared. Write a list of your key points you want to focus on, and feel free to elaborate on your accomplishments. So having those in front of you and ready to go is definitely important. In terms of the don'ts, don't forget to charge your cell phone, and to put it on vibrate or on silence. You don't want to get any other calls during the interview. Avoid really all distractions. Don't rush your responses. It's perfectly acceptable to take a moment or two to collect your thoughts. So as Jamal was mentioning before, the importance of thinking before you speak is key here. Don't interrupt the interviewer. So if the interviewer is telling you something and they're explaining a certain point, let them speak. The same way the interviewer will let you speak, you as the interviewee need to let the interviewer speak. And don't let them hear you typing or clicking or turning pages. Oftentimes, the recruiter can hear noises in the background and they're wondering to themselves, okay, what is causing the distraction? And they're more focused on that than in terms of the content that you're delivering. So be mindful of that as well.
To add to that as well, when you're doing an interview on the phone, you don't have the added advantage of them seeing you. So you need to really make sure that your voice is not monotone, that there's energy in your voice, because that's the first impression. That's the first real impression that they have of you. You need to keep them interested in your candidacy. A good way of doing that over the phone is to make sure that your answers are concise. Unfortunately, sometimes candidates, they have a tendency to really take a long time to give a concise answer. Stick to examples and develop from there, but you want to use those 20 to 30 minutes to really shine and not spend those minutes on just a few questions that the interviewer has for you. Moving on to the next slide. We'd like to cover, what you need to do to prepare for an in-person interview. So this is a big deal for most of us,
yes.
Right? We got through the phone interview. We're like, okay, this is great. They like me. They want to bring me in. Now I really have to make a good impression in the face-to-face interview. So I just want to reassure you, it is normal to be nervous. It is normal to maybe not sleep well before the night before. We've all been in the same boat. Even as a recruiter, we also get nervous when we go to do our interviews. But preparation is key, and if you follow this advice, you might actually have a better chance to do well in the interview. So, just like in school, it was always important to get a good night's sleep before an exam. The same thing applies to interviews. Get a good night's sleep so that when you get there, you don't seem tired. So that your thoughts come to you faster, and so that you can also continue to give a good impression. Confidence is very, very important. You want to enter the interview in a very confident manner. I would even go, above that and say you should enter the building in a confident manner. Oftentimes, the recruiter or the hiring manager will go speak with the secretary in front to be like, how did this person present themselves when they first entered our offices? So you want to maintain that positive image from the beginning. Um, we suggest that you carry a portfolio or a professional bag with you. The reason for that is you don't know if the recruiter will hand you a paper that you need to take with you. You don't want to just be holding it and not be able to put it anywhere. Oftentimes they'll give you their business cards, so you want to have a place to put that in. Of course, at this point, unlike the phone interview, you want to turn off your cell phone during the interview.
Yes. It's important.
It's very important because you don't want to get distracted. I mean, even if the hiring manager has their phone with them, it's important that you don't have your phone. You want to be fully focused and not, hear the vibration of your phone or whatnot. So here's the thing. There's a lot of, talk about, should I arrive too early? Should I not arrive too early? It's important to not arrive too early. We'd say maybe 20 minutes before the interview is good. Like this, just in case there's something that happens, that you're going to arrive on time. And it also gives you an extra few minutes. Maybe if you need to go to the washroom, have a look at yourself in the mirror before, relax before getting there as well. You don't want to be, let's say, finding parking and then heading up and having to rush or coming into public transportation and so on and so forth. So you want to arrive and be relaxed. The important thing that you need to remember about an in-person interview is that the hiring manager or the recruiter need to leave the room remembering everything that you told them and the quality of your answers. If you wear strong cologne or perfume, or if you smell of coffee or cigarettes, this might really leave a mark with them. So you want to avoid doing that. Also, you never know when someone has an allergic reaction to certain perfumes, and you want to be respectful of that as well. Moving on to the next slide.
Perfect. So here we're going to talk about the importance of having power statements. So of course, the interview, whether in person or over the phone, you want to be able to kind of sell yourself in a positive light. But there's an important part here. If you say a statement, I can achieve results, the recruiter will be, okay, tell me more. So the important part here is to really demonstrate your worth by backing up your statements with facts. So if you want to highlight on the results that you've achieved, start by saying, I started a new tracking method that reduced errors by X amount. I make good decisions instead of leaving it at that. Give an example and say, I make good decisions. I applied product design changes that resulted in so on. Same thing for, I'm creative. You can give an example as to how you were creative. Again, I have organization management skills. That sounds fancy, but, it's meaningless if you don't back it up. So give an example. I reorganized the company's manufacturing department, increasing yield by X amount. So again, we want to add substance to your statement.
It actually brings us back to looking at the job description and finding examples to provide to the interviewer. So, for example, I started a new tracking method that reduced the errors by that percentage. You probably noticed on the job posting that they're looking for someone who's result-oriented. By preparing that example, first of all, it shows your motivation, it shows what kind of person you are in your work and your work ethics, and it adds value to your answers.
Absolutely, and by doing that, you make yourself that much more competitive in the job market. So definitely invest in that.
Moving on to the next slide here. I'd like to talk to you about the interview preparation recap. Okay, sorry about that. So let's recap what we said, I should say. Sorry about that. The do's, tell your story. Walk the interviewer through your career trajectory and tell a story about your experiences and career goal and how the position you are applying for will help you get there. We'll cover, having your sales pitch or your elevator pitch in a few seconds. But this is really just you knowing yourself, being confident about what you want and your past experience, and being able to position it in a positive manner. You also need to know your audience. How do you do that? By doing your research about the role, the company, the people that are interviewing you. Success starts with a solid understanding and knowledge of what you will be doing in the role and what the company is all about. This will also help you easily establish a rapport. We spoke about that before, tapping into your network, doing research online, really going above and beyond to differentiate yourself from the other candidates for the role. Be prepared with a list of questions to ask the employer so you're ready when you're asked if you have questions for the interviewer. I would say always have questions for the interviewer because it does demonstrate your motivation once again. Recruiters, hiring managers, they want to normally hire someone that they can count on, someone who seems motivated, someone who will stay with them and grow with them. And having those questions shows exactly that. Follow up a job interview with a thank you note, telling them your interest in the job once again. So I guess this question a lot, when should I send the thank you note? I will leave it up to you, but I would say maybe wait a day or two before sending the thank you note because it serves for two things. First of all, it shows that you are a courteous person and being courteous really goes a long way. And second of all, it serves as a reminder for the hiring manager or recruiter. So if you send them an email in 2 days, they'll go, oh yeah, of course, I spoke to this candidate, he did beautifully. Let me follow up with him, or let me follow up with the hiring manager to see if they made a decision in terms of his candidacy.
And of course, just to add to that, Jamal, just going back to the piece for being prepared and asking the recruiter questions, that's definitely important because it's not just a one way. The whole interview process, whether it's on the phone or in person, it's definitely a two-way street, So as many questions as the recruiter is asking you, feel free to ask questions, of course, when it's appropriate, maybe at the end of the interview, and really engage in that dialogue. That's the kind of experience that we're looking for. So now, in terms of things not to say at a job interview. As humans, it's human nature, of course, to get a little nervous. And sometimes when we're nervous, we kind of verbalize that. But please, during the interview, do not begin by saying, interviews make me really nervous. Because, you're kind of setting the tone for the interview, and that's not the vibe you want to give off. And also, don't speak in a monotone voice. Sometimes people in general, not people in general. I mean, some people, struggle with that. They have to put a little bit more energy to get to be more effective when speaking. But you know what? Just know that you have to have that confidence, and I think that if you keep that in mind, it really does go a long way. So just remember to be engaging and let your confidence shine through when you speak. Don't badmouth your last employer, manager, company. So as Jamal had mentioned already, we wanted, what was your takeaway from that experience? So whether it was positive or negative, really convey what it was about that job, what it was that you learned. And don't forget to listen carefully before answering. So again, we want to emphasize, think before you speak. It's better to talk and convey what you want to say instead of stumbling over your words and going back and forth. So take the time you need to reflect and really come up with what you want to say. And practice your handshake, as Jamal was saying. Have a firm grasp, have that confidence, own that moment.
Perfect, excellent. Really the message here is be confident. And how are you going to be confident? Is by preparing for either for the phone interview or the in-person interview. Without preparation, your confidence will lack, and yes, you will be nervous. You will be overly nervous, and the interviewer will feel that, will sense that. For the handshake, in the first 30 seconds, again, the interviewer will decide if the interview will go well or not. And a good handshake will really help you set the tone for the interview. It will show your confidence. A few tips for you, just to recap as well: dressing for success, so preparing ahead of time what you want to wear, and knowing your resume so that you don't have to read from it. You can print a job posting so that you can go back to the requirements of the role so that you can give good examples. You should have a high positive energy level because it's difficult, to follow a conversation when a person is monotone, when they don't seem interested. That it might appear as if they are lacking the motivation for the position. It shouldn't be scripted, and you can do that by preparing for the interview. Use your network once again to find out more about your future employer, and be thorough in your responses by being concise in your wording. Again, you only have 30 minutes to an hour to show your skills to your future employer, and you want to be able to cover as many topics as possible. So we'll leave you with this note: practice in terms of to prepare for the interview.
Absolutely.
Moving on to the next slide.
All right. So in terms of, I think it's
Just in the next slide as well, please, Sanya.
perfect. So we're going to talk about building your brand. What is your brand? You know, everyone has their own personal brand. So no matter what your background is, everyone has a certain way in which they carry themselves and they portray themselves to the world. So your brand is basically a reflection of who you are, how you are perceived by others, and how you appear to the entire world at large. A personal brand should be interesting, polished, and recognizable. So when I think of somebody, I want to think of them as either probably these are examples, so they can be reserved, thoughtful, hardworking, charismatic, dynamic, dependable, trustworthy, team player, passionate, and compassionate. It's not a mission statement. It's rather a simple and memorable statement describing who you are and what you have to offer. So when we think of Disney, we think, okay, it's, you know, fun family, entertainment. So you really have to ask yourself, you know, what is your personal brand? Why, you might ask? Well, the importance of building a personal brand, if you're employed or looking for a job, you must think, act, and manage your reputation. We have to be mindful of this both online and in real life. Employers, you know, may Google you before they even invite you to an interview to see, okay, who is this person? Internally, your presence on RBC Connect and your talent profile may or may not say a lot about who you are. So obviously the employer, I know as an interviewer, sometimes if I recognize the person's name or I'm just curious about the person, I won't hesitate to go on LinkedIn, maybe search the person. So yes, people, we do that. So it's important to be mindful of that. So here are some important points to consider. Ask yourselves, are you coming across in the exact way you want others to perceive you? You need to understand and be your authentic self versus your fake self. Your brand, do what you believe and what you stand for, you know. These are important questions to ask yourself. Focus on your strengths and be aware of what it is you need to improve. Build your online presence. So as Jamal was mentioning earlier, the importance of, you know, social media and networking. And, you know, some of us never have before, but maybe it would be a good idea to Google yourself and see what comes up, you know. We want to make sure there's appropriate content on social media always. You know, remain a student of your industry. So I really like this philosophy because here you want to adopt a learning attitude. We want to be able to stay relevant, stay up to date on the newest trends, be familiar with the market, especially for those of us that are new to the Canadian labor market. Always, you know, be proactive in your learning and inform yourself. And in this way, you know, you're going to develop new skills and increase your business acumen.
Thank you. Moving on to the next slide. Thank you, Tanya. Continuing on the topic of building your brand. Building your brand doesn't happen overnight, of course, right? So you're learning about yourself, you're learning about what you want to do in the future, you're developing on yourself. So don't be afraid, don't worry, it's normal that it takes time. Something that will help you though in the interview process is having self-confidence. Becoming more confident isn't something that just occurs overnight. You build self-confidence with time. Self-confidence comes from figuring out what your strengths are and your weaknesses, what your weaknesses are. These are things these are things that you're amazing at, and others that you need to get better at. What do we mean by that? It's for sure, the hiring manager or the recruiter will ask you at a certain point, what do you need to improve on, or what are your weaknesses? So knowing yourself and knowing how to work on that can offer them an honest response to their question. There's nothing we dislike more than someone just giving us a generic answer to that question. What do you need to improve on? If you know what you need to work on and you've put into place a strategy to develop on that skill, the recruiter or hiring manager will love hearing your answer because they'll see that you're someone who is solution oriented. They'll see that you're someone that is honest, and they'll know that you're someone that has given some thoughts into that and that is looking for personal growth.
Yeah, so don't fall into that trap of when you're asked what do you need to work on.
Absolutely. And you need to know how you want to be perceived. So how do people currently perceive you? a good way to find out, you can actually go ahead and ask the people around you how they perceive you. Sometimes it's difficult to hear the answers, but by hearing those answers, you can definitely work on the things that need to be improved on. What adjectives would people describe you as? What needs to be worked on in order for you to be perceived in the way you wish? Creating your own personal brand takes time. Your personal brand includes tangible and intangible characteristics. It is created. It is created by the way you present yourself. You are the product that is created over time to be the best that you can be. Again, you're sort of doing like a research on yourself, and then from that point, putting in an action plan to become perceived the way you want to be perceived. Being prepared ahead of time is very, very important. So when it comes to work, being prepared is key when it comes to giving off a good first impression. For example, in a job interview, you're not always going to know what you're going to be asked or what topics are going to be talked about. But having background knowledge on the company or position is important. What does the business value? What are their future goals or vision for the future? Be prepared and be confident. And this is a good exercise for you to do to make sure that your values are aligned with the company. I'm a strong believer that if you share the same values as the company you want to work for, you have a higher chance of success. So knowing them ahead of time can also make you decide whether or not this is a position that you want as well. And in terms of building your brand at a bigger scale, depending on where you work, it is part of your brand as well, and you want to be careful with that.
Absolutely. So moving on to the next slide, or the slide after this.
We're actually done with our presentation, but we'd love to be able to answer some of your questions if you have any questions for us.
Thank you, ladies. That was very, very informative. We are getting a lot of questions, so everyone will give you a few moments to type in your questions. Please make sure that your questions are short so that we can take them up. And I'm just launching it right now. So, ladies, if you can turn your camera on so we can see you while you're answering questions.
For sure.
And the first question that I'm going to look at is, one second. Okay, so Guanlin has a question, wants to know what's the procedure to be selected for an on-site interview? Is there a phone interview before I apply? Like he's applied several times and he's not sure, what the process is. Maybe you're missing him.
Do you want me to take on this one?
Well, I can go ahead. I mean, of course, that's a really good question. A lot of the times, candidates are concerned when they don't hear a response from the recruiter. On our end, it's important to keep in mind, we get a large pool of candidates, and we do our best to go through each one of those CVs and to be able to extract the right talent for the role. So if I understood correctly, there was no follow-up or a response. In this situation, I mean, I would be proactive. I would contact the recruiter and ask them for a follow-up. And at that point, they're going to be more than happy to assess the CV and see what it is that would be needed for the role, or if there's anything that's lacking. Recruiters are really open to having a transparent discussion.
I'd like to add as well.
Yes.
Sorry about that. When you're applying for a position, it's also very important that the qualifications are stated clearly on your resume. So it's possible, depending on how you did your resume, that we weren't able to derive if you are qualified for the role or not. If you feel like you are qualified for the position, it might be time to go back to your CV to make some modifications to really to allow the recruiter to see the things that you want her to see or him to see on your CV that might have caused it for you not to be selected in the first place for a phone interview. Normally the process is there's a CV screening, and then after that you might have an assessment that you need to complete, and then after that we do normally a phone interview. And now with technology, it might be a virtual interview where you're able to see the recruiter as well, and they're able to see you. And then normally, if everything goes well, this is where we move on to the in-person interview.
Thank
So that answers
you.
your question.
Oh, I think that answers more than just a question. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Mina has a question, wants to know what are typical questions that I can ask during an interview?
That's a really good question. Because personally, I love it when candidates ask me questions. So I mean, of course, you want to ask what are the expectations that the company has. What is the training like? You know, what they can expect from the training. If there's anything they can do to prepare in advance, which normally the case is no, because RBC is one of the best companies. Of course, then we do offer an extensive training. So, and then in terms of the reality. So, a day in the life of an advisor, what is that like? And we're more than happy to have those conversations and fill in those gaps that might be there.
I'd like to add as well, you can ask questions that align with your own personal values. For example, if it's important for you to work in a collaborative environment, and you know, like historically, when you have worked for employers that didn't have a collaborative environment, you weren't necessarily very happy there. You might want to ask some questions about that because, again, when you're getting interviewed for a position, they're not only interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. You want to make sure that if you join this new company, you're going to be happy there. So think about your own personal values and the kind of questions you'd like to ask in regards to that. Also, I think this is a perfect time to ask questions that clarify the job description as well. So if there's something that you read on there that you weren't sure about, this is the time to ask for it. And you can also ask about the team. Again, it goes back to what's important to you.
Thank you. Um, we had a question here. So how should people manage time to answer a question? So during an interview, how long should you take to answer a question?
That's a great, great question, and thank you so much for asking it, whoever asked it. There's no specific time for you to take to answer a question, but I would say that the best way to answer a question is to provide a concrete example. So don't start off with a general vague statement. If they ask you a question, go straight to the example, and then if they ask you to elaborate on that, you can elaborate at that point. Um, it's important that the answer is not too short as well because you still want to seem engaged and motivated. Um, a good way to prep for this is to exactly do that, to prep for the interview ahead of time. There are a few questions that you know they will ask you during the interview. They'll talk to you about your past experience, they'll talk to you about your motivation and what your future plans are. You can prep for those ahead of time so that when you're asked this, your answer is concise and you seem prepared for it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying during the presentation. Really take the time to think and develop your answers before, saying the first thing that might come to mind, which is not always the filtered response. So really take the time, and the recruiter will appreciate that as well.
And don't go in circle in your answer. We get that a lot. It's like the answer that never stops.
Yeah.
Don't go in circle. That's why,
Yeah.
as John was saying, think about it and then answer the question so that you know that it's a quality answer.
And just to add to that as well, I mean, if it's a phone interview, as the candidate, you can actually tell them, oh, that's a good question. Let me think about it. So you're directly telling the recruiter that you need time to think about it. So it's a good thing.
We might have pulled that trick on you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Jay has a good question. Wants to know, should you always ask for feedback after an interview? So let's say you haven't heard back after a week. Should you ask for feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always important to ask for feedback, even a follow up a few days after the interview. First of all, after the interview finishes, the recruiter will normally give you a time frame as to when you should expect a response. So, normally maybe 3 to 5 business days. If that time does pass and you haven't heard from the recruiter, yes, we are still human. It happens that maybe we forgot or, it might have slipped through the cracks. We are human after all. But feel free to reach out to the recruiter, call them or email them and ask for a follow up. I would call. That would be better to reach the recruiter so you have them on the line and they can tell you where they are in terms of your candidacy.
Okay. I'd like to add that if you're asking for feedback, be ready to receive the feedback.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
Yeah.
The recruiter will be honest with you. They will tell you where maybe another candidate did better, and at this point, it's for you to take the feedback and to work with it. It's not the time at that point to negotiate with the recruiter on the status of your candidacy, because if a decision was made, then a decision was made.
Yeah. So, for example, if you know you struggle a little bit more in a certain language, and you know this position is bilingual, then of course have that conversation with the recruiter. Tell them, okay, I'm actually enrolled in a French class, for example, and I'm going to do everything I can to practice and really be proactive in my learning. So that way, in 6 months down the line, the recruiter is going to write a note in your file, and they're going to be more than happy to reopen your candidacy at a later date.
Perfect, thank you. Karen has a question, wants to know how long does it take for an interview call after taking a personality assessment, if you've passed and made it?
You can go ahead.
It depends. It depends. It depends on the number of candidates that we received. So there's no clear answer I could give you, unfortunately. But for one thing is certain is that if you've done an assessment, you will get a response from a member of the recruitment team, whether positive or negative. I would say wait 5 business days after completing the assessment. If you still didn't get a response at that point, just maybe reply to whoever sent you the assessment to go like, I completed the assessment. Do you have any news for me in regards to my candidacy? So 5 business days is good. If you're able to wait 2 weeks, 10 business days, that's also good as well. Keep in mind that in the recruitment process, sometimes we move quickly, sometimes we move a little slower, but we will always be there to respond to you, to let you know where we're at, and we are transparent in our process.
Thank you. Kaita has a question, quite unique a little bit, but she's come across some interviewers who are argumentative and wants to know how would you deal with an interviewer like that?
That's a really good question. Of course, we're still humans at the end of the day. So if it does happen, I mean, I know at RBC specifically, I mean, that's not part of our values. I mean, I've never encountered that with any of our colleagues. But if it does happen, I mean, it is unfortunate. But it's always important to be diplomatic and be professional. So you always want to maintain that level of professionalism wherever it is that you go, even if you know in your heart that the recruiter is wrong, or that their values don't match with yours. You want to be diplomatic at all times.
I'd like to say as well that, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'd like to say as well that, remember when we were saying, you're ready with your questions, you want to make sure that it's the right fit for you. It's a good time at that point to consider, like, if the recruiter is like that with me, or the hiring manager is like that with me, is this really something that I want? Does this represent the culture? I might want to follow up with, what's your culture like? What am I supposed to expect here? What are your values? How do you implement your values? Because you don't want to start a job and then have to leave not too long after. You want to be able to stay there for a long time. If you encounter an interviewer that is argumentative, I would say this is not the war that you're trying to win, right? You're trying to make a good impression and really just shine. So I would direct the conversation back to your experiences, to your accomplishments, so that you can stop that topic of conversation right then and there. But let the recruiter lead the conversation, but show that you're ready to move on to the next question.
Absolutely. And like you were saying, Jamal, you want to assess that the fit is there. Again, the interview process is not just about the recruiter, it's about you and, what you're able to bring to the company, and vice versa, what the company can bring to you.
Thank you so much. Amitashwar has a question, wants to know, should you connect on LinkedIn with the interviewer before the interview?
That's a good question. It happens sometimes where I get requests, and it's perfectly fine. I'm very open to that. It's nice. I prefer maybe that the candidate connects after the interview. Regardless of the outcome, it's still a good connection to have in terms of the network and all of that. Before might look a little, too eager. It's better after the experience, after going through the interview process.
Also, okay, so when you apply at a company, keep in mind that it's not all recruiters that work on all positions. We all have our set number of positions that we work on, so sometimes you're actually just reaching out to the wrong person.
Right.
A good way to avoid that is, if you find a position that you like online, apply on it, And then if you want to reach out to a recruiter, at least if this person was to go and search for you, they know who to direct you to. When you work for a national company or international company, there's a lot of people that are involved, so we want to be able to help you if you reach out to us, so that there's some value for you from our interaction as well.
Thank you. Cam1 has a question, and you talk about personal branding. They want to know what branding is RBC looking for in a
That's
candidate or a future employee.
Yes, so that's really important. As we know, I hope most of us are aware, RBC is the number one bank in Canada. So for us, branding and image is really everything. So of course, we have certain values that we abide by. So collaboration, diversity, integrity, and of course, I mean, this is something that we want to be able to see in our candidates. You need to embody these values and really project that. We're the number one bank for a reason, so we want our candidates to be able to portray themselves in the utmost professional manner.
And a good way to do that is through, we're very big on community involvement. So if it's something that you enjoy doing and is genuine, you can get into that. Accountability is part of our values. So when you do an interview, you need to be able to demonstrate that you're a person that really handles an issue from A to Z. You're not someone who blames others for mistakes that were done. So really, if you have the values, then you have the right brand that we're looking for.
Awesome. Pratik has a question, wants to know, how do recruiters view new immigrants?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
How do recruiters view new immigrants? So what do you think of when a new immigrant has applied to the position? It looks like, they haven't worked in Canada. How do you view them as candidates?
Well, that's a really good question. Part of our core values, again, is diversity and inclusion. So we are proud that we work in collaboration with ACCESS Employment. We want to give equal opportunity to everybody. And to work at a bank, we value diversity. So, of course, we're looking at people with different backgrounds, different experiences. If you wanted to add to that, Jamal?
No, you said it all.
Yeah, so that's basically what it is, So we really do value that, and we're proud that that's one of our core values. And we look at them as of course, an asset for our company. We're always looking to grow and develop ourselves and really make ourselves bigger, and we pride ourselves on that value of diversity.
Thank you. And I hope that makes everyone feel a lot better, because we get questions like this all the time, and we can't emphasize enough on RBC's recruitment and diversity. So again, that answers your question, everyone, as well. Sidra's got another good question, wants to know, what's the best way to answer the salary expectation question?
Great question. So I'd like to answer that if you don't mind.
Do it.
So when you're answering the salary question, there's a few things that you need to keep in mind. What I personally do, and what a lot of my candidates do as well, is they look at how much money they need to make to maintain a certain quality of life. So before coming into an interview, you need to look at your expenses, how much money you need to make to maintain the quality of life that you have right now. You should always give a scale, so never like a direct number. And you need to assess beforehand if there's flexibility or not. Recruiters, we always get this this answer, oh yeah, we're flexible, and then when it comes to time to do an offer, it turns out that they're not actually flexible because they didn't put in the research before coming into the interview. They didn't decide how much money they needed to make. You should know that most employers in Canada, have a pay scale for each position, and we are fair in the way that we assess that. We look at your experience, your education, what you're able to bring into the company. So there's always, normally, you give your scale. If it fits within their range, they will let you know. And in terms of negotiation, you need to be ready, and you need to prepare why you deserve a certain salary as well. I wouldn't say, you don't need to answer the question, how much were you making with your previous employer? That's not important, because you're changing employers now, or you're joining a new company, you're expecting different things from your new employer. But know your expenses, know how much you need to make to be happy, to have a good quality of life, and answer it with a pay scale, and decide beforehand if you have some flexibility there or not.
Yeah, and although that's definitely an important topic, an important conversation to have with the recruiter, I wouldn't ask that as the first thing, because often enough it does happen where candidates they're asking and they're saying, okay, what is the salary right away, right off the bat.
Mhm.
If the salary is the only motivation, the recruiter will sense this, and then it kind of hinders the candidacy.
Because if you ask right away what the salary is, for us, it's like, what if the next employer can offer them $5,000 more? Are they going to go to that employer? You need to be able to demonstrate your motivation, and you need to be able to show that if you do get this position, you're there to stay.
Thank you, ladies. You've been doing a really good job answering questions in so much detail that it's actually answering a lot of other questions as well. So
That's great.
everyone's satisfied, I'm guessing here. Catherine has a question, wants to know when you ask if a client or if a candidate has special needs, what are you able to provide as in for accommodation? Like, for example, is it if it's a hearing or visual disability or physical disability? What is it that you would go out of your way to do for a candidate?
Yeah, so RBC does have a responsibility as in terms of the interview process. We will, as a recruiter, we're always going to ask if you need any special accommodations for work, be it physical, any other special accommodations, because we do value diversity. So again, we need to accommodate to that. We need to, as a business, we need to reassure that we're utilizing the resources we have to provide our candidates. We want to set them up for success. In terms of the actual physical accommodations, it's whatever, there's no budget or anything, it's whatever the person needs. So if it's a special ergonomic chair, then we're going to do that. If it's, maybe the person has vision problems, then we can expand the screen. I know recently, to give an example, someone had a vision impairment, and so the business had put stickers on the doors everywhere in the center. So this is another step that we're going to partake in.
Really, the message here is, as long as you're transparent with what you need to be accommodated for, we will direct you to the right person, and they will find a way for them to accommodate you, for you to be comfortable at work and to have an equal chance as others in being successful. Just to let you know, as well as RBC, it's not just when you start the job, but when you come in for an interview. So we haven't covered it in the presentation, but what you should know is that if you let us know ahead of time that you need a special accommodation, we will prep the room or whatever we need to do before you get here, so that you have the same chance as other candidates to get the position.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just trying to see. Uh, can you maybe go over how to answer what is a weakness of yours? Question.
So let's say I'm the interviewee and someone asks me, what is my weakness?
Jamal, what is your weakness?
Public speaking. But jokes aside, public speaking is an important part of HR. We often have to go and present, and it is definitely something that I needed to improve on since I started there. So when a recruiter asks me what do I need to work on, I say public speaking, and then I follow up with the fact that I've been taking classes to improve my public speaking. I've been getting feedback from people that I've presented to know exactly what I need to work on, and I've put into place different methods to improve on things that need to be improved in my public speaking. So this is a good example of saying something specific that you need to work on, the action plan that you put into place, and the way that you put it into place. So here in my answer, I'm saying, I'm open to feedback, I'm receptive to coaching, I'm solution oriented. This is what you want. This is the message that you want to show to your interviewer.
Thank you. Another question that a lot of people are asking is if people are on their way to Canada, so they've got their PRs and they've started to apply for jobs, would you give preference to people who are already here as compared to the people that are on their way?
No, not at all. We don't discriminate. When we get CVs, we're really looking at the experience, the education, and what they're able to bring to the table. We don't ask if you're in Canada or not.
And a lot of people now, they're not even putting their addresses on their CVs anymore. because it's not a necessary field. Also, by the way, you don't have to put your picture on your CV, your marital status, the year you were born in Canada. This is all information that you don't put on your CV because it can lead to discrimination and you don't want to be discriminated against. So you can remove all of that information. If you are qualified for a role, technically you should be getting a follow-up email or call unless another candidate has been selected for the position. I know that a lot of people what they choose to do is moving to Canada, they write it in either in the cover letter or in the summary of their CV, moving to Canada in September, looking for a position where I can, et cetera, et cetera. So you can even state that on your CV, but technically speaking, if you're qualified for the role, you should be considered for the position.
Yeah, and you just have to be obviously legally entitled to work in Canada, so be it a work permit, student permit,
Right.
we won't discriminate.
Okay, thank you. And I think that answers a lot of people questions because I was going down the list and I feel like everyone was asking the same question. So I hope that helps everyone. And you're hearing it straight from the recruiter, so you know it's the truth. And Jamal and Joanne, I just want to thank you very much for a very, very insightful webinar. It was lovely to have you ladies on board. I hope we can get you guys back again. We did have a huge turnout and there are a lot of questions that were unanswered, but unfortunately, we are at the end of our webinar. Before I move forward to my slides, is there anything else that you'd like to say?
Well, thank you so much. I mean, Sonia, you did a wonderful job, and thank you for having us. I know RBC, we always do well, in our partnership with Access Employment. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who attended the webinar. I hope that you got the most from it. We hope to see you in future webinars as well. And thank you. Thank you, Sonia.
And I'd like to thank everyone for attending. It was honestly a really informative webinar, one of the best that we've had. And thank you, ladies, again. And everyone, if you do want to stay in touch with us, we are very active on our social media, and we are always posting any upcoming online or in-house events over there as well. So you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook. And make sure to check out September events that will be coming on. Everyone, I hope you have an amazing day or evening ahead. And Jamal and Joanne, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.